I'd like to welcome everyone to the Stratus Time Training for Managers for Beacon Specialized Living Services, Inc. This session will last for approximately 60 minutes, during which there will be times in which you can get your questions answered. During the question and answer portions of our session, I will prompt you that if you have a question to ask it. During the training portions of the session, as is the case at this time, I will be putting participants on mute. During the question and answer portions of our session, I'll be bringing participants off of mute, which means that once again, other participants will be able to hear your private conversations, including those that occur in the background. If you'd like to keep your conversations private during these times, you'll have some options. If your phone or your headset has a mute function, you are welcome to use it during these periods. In the participants panel to your right, if your name has a phone or a headset icon next to it, you can put your pointer over that, and then to the right of your name, a microphone icon will appear. And you can click on that microphone icon to toggle between mute and unmute. We do ask that if you're using the teleconference that you avoid using the hold function, because if there is a hold message or hold music, this can be disruptive to other participants. The agenda for today's session will be as follows. We're going to start with a brief navigational review. This is where we take a high-level overview of the main dashboards in the application. After that, we'll take a look at things from an employee standpoint. We'll talk about how your employees can perform functions such as web punching, timesheet approval, as well as submitting time off requests. After that, we'll take a look at things from a manager perspective as we discuss daily processes and best practices. We'll talk about how you as managers can do things like edit and approve time cards, process time off requests, and more. After that, we'll get into reports, resources, and then we'll take your final questions. So with that, but before we get into our first two topics having to do with the navigational review and employee functionality, I would like to briefly talk about login. If you've not yet received your site address, your client ID, login ID, and password, this is information you should be receiving from your administrator shortly after today's session. You will notice that there are checkboxes to have the application remember the client ID and login ID. This will make it easier for subsequent logins. So with that, let's get into the navigational review and employee functionality. Now, when you first log into the application, this is the page that you will see. It is known as the Manager Dashboard, and it is here that you'll be spending the majority of your time. To get things started, though, we'll begin with the User menu. The User menu can be found in the upper right-hand area. It is here that you'll see your name. And when your employees log in, it is here that they will see their name. Working from the top down, everyone will have access to the employee dashboard. You can think of this as a self-service area for your employees. As far as the manager dashboard, which is the page that we are viewing now, only managers and administrators will have access to this. There's an option to change your password, and of course everyone will have the option to log out. To continue our navigational review, let's take a quick look at the employee dashboard. You can access the employee dashboard under the user menu and the icon that looks like a single person. Under the manager dashboard, it is here that your employees can record their time by web punching. Other options for recording time can be found under Actions. Employees can view their schedules, view their time off balances and submit time off requests, view and send messages, view and approve their time cards, and run reports. We'll take a closer look at the employee dashboard when we get into employee functionality. For now, though, let's take a quick look at the manager dashboard. Oh, by the way, employees will also have access to the status board, and it is here that they can see by push-pin functionality what employees are in, out, at meal, on break, when their last transaction has occurred, and any applicable notes. But getting back to the manager dashboard, and this is accessible by only managers and administrators by going to the user menu and choosing the icon that looks like multiple people. Under the manager dashboard, you will see a series of tabs. The current tab we are viewing is known as the Home tab. And under the Home tab, there is the Large widget and the Small widget. Right now, the Large widget shows the status board. The status board shows your list of employees, and it uses push-pin functionality to allow you to be able to tell whether or not employees are absent, out, in, at meal, on break, when their last transaction has occurred, and any applicable notes. The Small widget at this point shows a transaction log. This will give you a running list of transactions that employees execute as they web punch for things like clock in and clock out, or when they begin their meal or end their meal. In addition to that, there's tabs for employee profiles, time cards, time off requests, and reports. This will conclude the portion of our training dedicated to the navigational review. We will now transition to our next topic, which is employee functionality. For this portion of training, we're going to go to the employee dashboard. To access the employee dashboard, you're going to choose the user menu and the icon that looks like a single person. So at this point, we're logged in as one of my sample employees, Adam Admin. Working from the top down, you will have these quick access icons, and these will be used for web punching. Now, because this is Adam's first time punching in for the day, logically that first punch should be a clock in punch. But as you can see, other options are available. To web punch, the employee would simply click on the appropriate icon. What comes up is a message letting them know that their punch was saved. And then once again, there's other icons that the employee can click on to perform other web punches. Next, under Actions, it gives employees basically another place to web punch. So I'm thinking probably best practice is going to be for the employees to simply use the web punch icons under the time up here. Now, to close out of this page, employees can either click on this left pointing arrow or simply click outside of the page. Next are schedules. It is here that employees can view their schedules. And there's an option to use this calendar view or a list view. They can move from one pay period to the next and 1 week to the next. In the lower right-hand area, it will show them their total scheduled hours in the yellow Post-it note. Next is time off. It is here that employees can view their time off balances and submit time off requests. I've been having a little bit of trouble with this right now, and if I can't get it working right now, it should start working a little bit later on, and we can come back around to it. But normally, the PTO balance will be listed here, and employees can see it at a glance. And then when they click on this icon, it is, again, usually here, I'm getting a recalculation message, but I can just kind of give a brief overview of it, and also there's some documentation that we can talk about, and we'll try and come back around to this to see if we can talk about how to submit time off requests. But normally, under balances is where employees would see their time off balances, and there's an icon that looks like a suitcase that they can click on to submit time off request. There's a calendar here, and it is here that employees can see the names of other employees that have approved time off requests. It'll show their name under the date that they have approved time off. And again, we'll come back around to this to see if we can get it working the way that it should. But normally, there'd be an icon that looks like a suitcase here that you could click on to submit a time off request. And then the time off requests themselves would show in this lower section. But for now, we can take a quick look at a document under this help link. And under employee documents, there's time off requests. So you can at least see what the screens are supposed to look like. Hopefully we can get things resolved. But normally, this is the way the icon would show so that you could see your balance. This would be what the icon to request time off would look like. And we have a sample of a picture of the calendar so that employees can see what other employees have time off requests, as well as their own time off, approved time off, I should say. And then to request time off, they would click on the suitcase icon to request time off. They would get their time off type. And again, just to let you know, this is a feature of Stratus Time that is customized for your organization, so that the time off types that your organization uses will be listed here, and that includes custom time off types. And again, your organization will be using personal time. So what they would do is they would choose the date range. So there's a start date and an end date. They would choose the time of day that they would, on the day that they are requesting off, that they'd like to start their time off. And in the hours per day field, they would enter in the hours and minutes that they wanted to take off. Typically, it's going to be 8 hours. There's a place for entering brief notes. And then they would click on Submit. Once they did that, here's what they would see under the Request Status section. They'd see at least the first date that is being requested off, the time off type, the total number of hours in the request, and the request status. If the request has been processed, it's going to let them know what manager or administrator has done so. If the employee entered notes on their request, there would be an icon that they could put that would show what those notes were. Manager notes would appear here. So if, let's say, a request has been denied, there might be notes that explain why, and the ability to delete. And again, we'll circle back around to time off requests a little bit later on. And appreciate your patience on that. So let's just take a quick look. Nope, still. All right. Next are messages. And it is here that employees can see an inbox of messages that have been sent by managers or administrators. The messages will show in this inbox section, and when they click on one of the messages to the right in this section, it would show the headers, and then the body of the message would show here. From there, the employee could reply, mark as unread, or delete. They also have the ability to create a message. Usually it will be sent to their direct manager. It is here that they can enter the subject of the message, here that they can enter the body of the message, and click on Send. Next is the time card, and it is here that employees can view and approve their time cards. Once again, there's buttons that allow them to move from one pay period to the next and 1 week to the next. Now, just to let you know, if, let's say, an employee moves out several weeks or goes back in time several pay periods, they can snap back to the current pay period or the current week by clicking on these buttons. You'll notice that there are check boxes here, and these are for employee time card approval. To approve their time cards, employees will put check marks in the approval check boxes. And they'll get messages letting them know that the time card has been approved. You'll also notice that it will let the employee know their total hours in this yellow Post-it note. A common question that comes up at this point is, okay, I can see how my employees will approve their time cards, but how will managers approve time cards? Well, we'll talk more about that when we get into daily processes and best practices. Again, remember when we're under this page, the manager dashboard, we're looking at things strictly from an employee standpoint. Finally, for employee functionality, there are reports. Reports allows your employees limited ability to run reports. Your employees will be able to run a schedules report and a time card report. So let's say that Adam would like to run his time card report. Click on time card. And working from the top down, he can choose the period that he would like to view. And there's options for the current pay period, previous pay period. He can even choose a user-defined period. Under report setting is where he can choose his output option. And there's options for Adobe PDF, Microsoft Excel, TIFF/PNG. For training purposes, we'll choose PDF and click on Run. So at this point, it's letting Adam know that his report is being generated. When it finishes generating, there'll be a link that he can click on to view the output of the report. And so the report is finished generating, and now when Adam clicks on the link, he can see the output of the report. And because it's in the PDF format, just like any other PDF document, he could print this out or save it as a PDF document. Let's try that. No. Well, we'll come back a little bit later on for the time off rules. But for now, at this time, if there are questions having to do with the navigational review and employee functionality, now would be the time to ask those questions.
Do any of you guys listening have any questions for the trainer or for myself? Nathan's here as well.
No. No. No.
All right.
No, I don't have any questions.
Well, all right. Well, if anybody thinks of questions having to do with topics that have already been covered, there's going to be one more opportunity to get your questions answered. So with that, we'll get into daily processes and best practices, reports, and resources. So with that, I'll get back into the application. And for this portion of training, I'm going to switch to the Manager dashboard. And for that, we're going to choose the user menu and the icon that looks like multiple people. Let's start with a bit of an overview of the Manager dashboard. And we'll start with the quick action icons for the Manager dashboard. Working from the left, the first icon you will see looks like a stop sign, and it represents missing punches. So what it's letting me know is that there is a missing punch on there's a missing punch on my employee time cards. If I were to click on it, it lets me know that it's actually Jane Deering that is a missing clock out. If I were to click on this pencil icon, it would take me to her time card where I could fill in that missing punch. Next is the exceptions icon. Exceptions track things that fall outside of what is expected, for things like tardy in punches or early out punches. If I had some on my time cards, there would be a number indicating how many. I could click on this icon and it would bring up a screen where I could acknowledge those exceptions. Alerts is not currently being used at this time, but it allows you to normally it would allow you to prioritize and inform about certain exceptions. But again, your organization is not using that. Time off requests. Normally here I'd have a time off request that we could view, and it would let me know the number of them. And if I clicked on this, it would take me to the screen where I could process them. And then finally, messages. This would take me to an inbox of messages that have been sent by employees, managers, or I should say other managers and administrators. Now below that, we have the tabs, and under the Home tab, we talked about the large widget and the small widget. Now I'd like to take a little closer look at things here. You'll notice that there's two icons in the upper right-hand area of the large widget. This first icon looks like a gear, and just to let you know, whenever you see a gear icon, it's going to be your way of knowing that options are available. In this case, you do have the option to expand the amount of information that the status board will show you. You can add things to the status board by moving them from the unselected list to the selected list. You can remove things from the status board by choosing them from the selected list and then moving them back to unselected. You can also reprioritize the information that you're seeing on the status board by clicking on one of the options under selected and then using these up and down arrows to move it up or down in the list. Next is the filter icon. This allows you to filter your list of employees by things like employee group, if you have access to multiple employee groups, or by your labor level or org units for things like division, branch, or department. In your list, there may be some filters that have been created for you by the administrator, and you have the option to clear those, create new ones, create new custom filters. Now, if you have a long list of employees and you just simply want to bring a single employee forward, you can enter that employee's name here and then click on Apply. Now, in addition to the status board, under the large widget, there's also an option for missing punches and exceptions and the summary widget. The summary widget goes day by day and shows you things like daily totals for scheduled hours versus actual hours, overtime hours, and missing punches. In this lower area, it will show you totals for the week. In addition to the transaction log, employees also have the ability, or should say, you as a manager can also choose the summary page. This will show you totals for scheduled hours, overtime hours, actual hours, and missing punches for the current week as well as the previous week. Next is the Employees tab. It is here that you'll have access to employee profiles. To view an employee's profile, you would click on their name, and then to the right, it will show you their information. After that are time cards. To view an employee's time card, you would click on their name, and then to the right, it will show you their time card. To the right, you will have the option to move from one pay period to the next and 1 week to the next. However, if you wanted to view a user-defined period, you could click here to choose a start date, here to choose an end date, and then click on Done. You will have the ability to view pay adjustments and time card approvals, which we'll take a look at in just a little bit. Now, at this point, I want to take one more opportunity, so I'm just going to pause things here for a moment. All right, so again, we have a sample site here, and we have the time off. So once chosen, again, your organization will be using time off, personal time off. So what an employee would do to submit a time off request is they would click on Request Time Off, and choose the appropriate time off type. So let's say that my sample employee would like to take this coming Friday off. He would choose that. You'll notice it automatically assumes that, whoops, make sure you can see that. Let me take a step back here. Sorry about that. So again, we're going to click on time off. Click on the suitcase icon. Choose the appropriate time off. On your site, only personal time off will be available. And again, let's say that my sample employee would like to take this coming Friday off. So he's going to choose that as the start date. You'll notice it automatically chooses that as the end date as well. For the start time, since he's looking for a full day's worth of time, he's going to leave it on the default start time of 8 a.m. And he's requesting 8 hours of time per day, on that day anyway. There's an option to include weekends. So if an employee's normal work week encompasses one or both weekend days, they can make one or both of those weekend days a part of their request by choosing a date range that encompasses one or both weekend days, and then they would put a check mark to include weekends. Now, because Friday is the date in question, it would not be appropriate to include weekends. There's also a place for entering brief notes. You'll notice that there's a balance showing here, so it's letting my sample employee know that this is what their starting balance is prior to at this time, and the ending balance lets them know what their balance will be if this request is approved. And they would click on Submit. And then under Request Status, it now shows the following information. It shows at least the first date that is being requested off, the time off type, the total number of hours in the request, and the request status. Again, as was previously mentioned, it'll let, if this request is processed, it'll let that employee know who processed that request, if they have. Employee notes, manager notes, and the ability to delete the request. So if this request was approved, it would show as approved. If it was denied, it would show as denied. Now, let's say that for whatever reason, my sample employee, their plans for the long weekend fall through. Well, what they can do, if they're not going to actually take this time, is click on this icon. What comes up is something, now if it's still in requested status, meaning it's still pending manager review, and they click on this icon, because no manager has processed this request, it would then be removed from his view as well as the manager's view. But what if the request has already been approved? Well, in such a case, if the employee were to click on this delete icon while the status was approved, it would then change from approved to cancellation request. And a cancellation request would be sent to the manager. All right, so what do things look like when you submit the request? What's it going to look like for the manager? Well, just give me a second and I'll show you that. All right, so what I did is I put in a request as one of the other employees in this site because I wanted you to be able to see it from a manager perspective. So for time off request, you're going to go to the time off tab. And under request, it's going to show you the, you have the ability to filter by status. Right now we have it set to only view requests that are under requested status, but as you can see, other filtering options are available. You could click on this filter icon to filter your employees by things like employee group or your labor levels or org units. Under balances, it is here that you could see your employee balances. Again, you're going to be using time off. Now for each request, it's going to show you as a manager the name of the employee, the date and time the request was submitted, the time off type, at least the first date that is being requested off, the total number of hours in the request, the available balance of hours prior to processing, and the ability to approve or deny the entire request. If there's a multi-day request, like this one for 32 hours, you can click on this magnifying glass icon, and what it'll do is it'll bring up a, it'll break out that multi-day request into individual days. In this view, you can then selectively approve or deny the individual days of the request. Now with Abby's request, we don't have a lot of time between the date the request was submitted and the date that is being requested off. In such a case, you may have some concern about whether or not you'll have proper staffing. What you can do is click on that request, and then to the right, you will see a calendar. And on this calendar, you will see names. The names of employees with approved time off, and the dates that that approved time off falls on. Well, the date in question is the 21st, and as you can see, no employee names are showing on this date, and it's shaded in gray, indicating that it is the requested time off. So also, if the current date's within the same month, it'll shade that in this blue that we see here. So looks like we can go ahead as far as coverage is concerned and approve this. So I'm going to do that for Abby. And when I do so, you'll notice that the page refreshes and lets me know that Abby now has approved time off on her time card. Also, that time has been added to her time card. So again, appreciate your patience on that, and that's the process for submitting a request and processing the request. Now let's get back to your site, and we'll continue on. So this is, again, your site. I'm going to go to the manager dashboard. And let's circle back around to time cards. And let's start with a bit of an overview of time cards. So once again, if you want to view a person's time card, you click on their name, and then to their right, it's going to show you their time card. And in this case, it's going to show you the different days of the week that have hours. So we've got John Doe here. And for each day, you're going to notice lines of information. And on these lines of information, you're going to see the following icons. The first is going to be a checkbox. We'll take a closer look at this a little bit later on, but it's for time card approval. Next is a manager and employee note icon. looks like a faint sheet of paper, and if an employee has entered a note when they were web punching, that note would show in this area. But this icon also allows you as a manager to add a note. You can click on it, and it is here that you could add a note and then click on Save. Next is the audit trail icon. It looks like a magnifying glass. Whenever you see this icon, it's going to be your way of knowing that information has been edited or changed on an employee's time card. If you were to click on this icon, it would show you a history of the changes that have been made and who has made those changes. After that, you have an edit icon. It looks like a pencil. If you click on it, what it'll do is it'll open things up, and it is here that I could edit the begin meal time. I could edit the clock in time. I could change the action on these punches. I could change the dates on these punches. I could click on this note icon to add more notes. Under modifiers, if you as a manager have authorization, here's a sample listing of the types of things that your administrator has granted you, such as to override an auto holiday, override an auto lunch, and more. Additional options are listed as well. So any edits that you make here, once you finish them, you would click on Save. And again, the pencil icon allows you to edit. The red X allows you to delete or remove time. In this case, I could delete just the clock in, just the begin meal, or both. Basically, it's going to be the punches that are on this line. After that, I have the in and out times. And then it'll let me know how much in the way of regular time, overtime, and unpaid time. Speaking of unpaid time, I have a meal listed here from 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m., resulting in actually, it looks like it's paid, 0.5 hours of paid time. All right. And in the lower right-hand area, it's going to show totals for regular work, meals, but it will also show you your totals for things like PTO. So that is the overview. Now, let's talk about options for adding time. And for that, we're going to switch to Jane's time card. One of the things you'll notice right away is next to Jane's name, there's a stop sign. And again, remember that the stop sign indicates a missing punch. And so it's here letting me know that there's a missing punch for Monday. We're missing the clock out punch. The easiest way to fill in this missing punch, in this case, let's say that we want to do it for 3:30 p.m. We can click on the clock out time, enter the time of 3:30 p.m., and click on Save. As this section refreshes, the new time of 3:30 p.m. has been saved. You'll also notice that the totals in the lower right-hand area have been updated as well. So that's one way to add time, and probably will be the way that you do so most often. But there's some other options. There's add punch, add work shift, add non-work shift, and then there's also the mass transaction editor. Add punch, I would think that this would be something that you would use for those of you that have manual department transfers, but just so you know, it could also be used to add a single timer punch for things like clock in or clock out. But if you're going to use it for a transfer, you could choose transfer. Here's where you could choose the date. Here's where you could choose the time of the transfer. There's a place for entering brief notes. And then as far as labor levels, you would choose from the appropriate labor levels, that, such as whatever division, whatever branch, whatever department this punch should fall under. But there's also the option of adding a work shift. Adding a work shift allows you to add an in punch and an out punch. So let's say that for a moment that Jane has done some off-site work on Wednesday, and we'd like her time card to reflect those off-site work hours. We could click on Add Work Shift, and working from the top down, you'll notice that there's two columns of information to fill in, one for the clock in side of things and the other for clock out. Now, just to let you know, you could also use this for adding a lunch period. On this side, you would choose Begin Meal. You'll notice it automatically fills in End Meal on the other side. But again, for training purposes, we're going to work with clock in and clock out. And as we said, this will be for Wednesday's date, so we'll choose that. You'll notice that when I choose it on this side, it automatically chooses it for the clock outside. Now let's say that Jane worked from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. We'll enter those times in. There's a place for entering brief notes. In this case, we want to note that this is for off-site work. So that's one way that you can enter notes, and notes are usually a good idea when you're adding time. There's also an option to use this prepackaged notes or shorthand notes, as they're called. Now, these are the options that are listed right now, but please bear in mind that this is a list that can be customized, so if there's something that you would like to see in this list, please have a conversation with your administrator, and I'm sure the assigned account specialist can help your administrator get those added to the list. This field allows you to duplicate these entries for additional days. So if I were to enter the number 2 here and click on Save, not only would a 9 a.m. punch and a 4 p.m. punch be entered for Wednesday, but a 9 a.m. punch and a 4 p.m. punch would also be entered for Thursday and Friday. And with that, we'll go ahead and click on Save. When this section refreshes, you'll notice that on Wednesday we now have a 9 a.m. punch and a 4 p.m. punch. And once again, if we need to make edits, there's the option there, or if we need to remove it, there's the red X. If we need to add a begin meal and end meal, we would just choose Add Shift, Add Work Shift, and in this case it would be begin meal and end meal. You know what, well, let's go ahead and do that. And again, we'll do that for Wednesday, and we'll make it for 12:30 or 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. Click on Save. And as you can see, the meal has been added. So once again, Add Work Shift allows you to add an in punch and an out punch. However, what if you need to add time that is not punched for things like PTO? Well, that's what this is for. So we talked about the idea of PTO being entered on the employee side of things by way of request. But perhaps there might be times where you need to add that type of time manually. For whatever reason, maybe the employee just doesn't have the accessibility to put in the request. Well, if that's the case, you can choose Add Non-Work Shift. And we'll add that this time for Friday. So we'll choose PTO Scheduled. And we'll do it for Friday's date. And for hours, we'll enter those 8 hours. You'll notice that Jane's balance shows here, so that if you need to make this type of entry, you can see what the balance is before you do so. And once again, there's a place for entering notes. Maybe we'll dispense with that particular feature this time and click on Save. And as the section refreshes, as you can see, the PTO scheduled is now listed. And it's also listed amongst the totals. So once again, Add Non-Work Shift allows you to add time that is not punched. The final option for adding time is the Mass Transaction Editor. We find that the majority of our clients do not have a use for this, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but just a quick overview. This allows you to add time to multiple employees' time cards. Once chosen, you could choose whether or not you wanted to add a single punch, add a work shift, add a non-work shift. And then you can choose the employees by moving them from the unselected list to the selected list. And the thing to remember is whatever you enter here is going to apply equally to both of these employees. So if I was going to, add some bereavement time, maybe this Friday for a funeral, I could do that and then click on Save. Again, I'm not actually going to add it, but again, the mass transaction editor allows you to add time to multiple employees' time cards. Now let's talk about time card approval. Time card approval can be done two ways. You can do it for a single employee at a time or for multiple employees at a time. To do it for a single employee at a time, of course, you'll want to, take a close look at the time card, make sure there's no stop signs indicating missing punches, make sure you've acknowledged the exceptions, make sure the hours look the way that they should. If that's the case, you can put check marks in these approval check boxes. So that now John Doe's time card has been fully approved. I'm actually going to unapprove it so that I can show you how to do time card approval for multiple employees at once. So to do time card approval for multiple employees at once, you would start by clicking on this Time Card Approvals tab. And working from the top down, you have options to choose what pay period you'd like to do time card approval for. And there's options for the current pay period, previous pay period. You could even choose a user-defined period. You can filter the employees by payroll policy. You can filter the employees by employee group if you have access to multiple employee groups. We find that typically managers only have access to their own direct reports. And then to the right, you will see two pie charts. This pie chart represents employee time card approval. This pie chart represents manager time card approval. So it's letting me know that neither one of my employees have approved their time cards yet. And the same condition exists for me as a manager. I've not approved either time card yet. Below that, you'll see two lists. This list, or I should say this column, represents employee time card approval, and this column represents manager time card approval. One thing you'll also want to take a look at, or look out for, I should say, are stop signs in this column, once again indicating missing punches. We don't have that, so I'm going to go ahead and check off my Check All Employees checkbox. And you'll now notice that for managers, or I should say from a managerial standpoint, it now lets me know that I, as a manager, have fully approved both time cards. And it reflects that here. But what about employee time card approval? What can I do about that as a manager? Well, that's where this icon comes into play. It looks like an envelope with a pencil. When I click on it, I have the option to message employees. And what message can I send them? Well, it's the time card approval reminder. Who is it addressed to automatically? Well, it's those two employees that have not fully approved their time cards yet. Now, this is something I could customize, perhaps by adding a deadline date to the subject. I could also add that deadline date to the body of the message. I can also determine when this message should expire, and auto delete. And then, of course, I would click on send. So how did I get here? Well, I clicked on the message icon and chose message employees. So that is time card approval. Now let's talk about reports. Reports can be accessed under the Reports tab. And it looks like you'll have access to over 30 different standard reports as well as custom or ad hoc reports. Now, as far as the standard reports are concerned, these are, again, over 30 reports having to do with managing employees, managing exceptions, hours paid, job tracking, and more. The most commonly run reports are the time card report, the hours summary report, and the exception summary report. For training purposes, we will run the time card report. Once chosen, you will open up a report criteria window. Now, before I go any farther, I'd like to draw your attention to this preview link. The preview link allows you to see what sample output will look like for a report. So if you're ever wondering what type of data a report will give you and you're not sure whether you have enough or the right type of data to populate that report, not to worry. You can click on this preview link, and what comes up is sample output of the report so that you can see not only what type of data the report will give you, but how that data will be laid out. And again, that's this preview icon. Working from the top down, you have the name of the report, and this is something that you could customize, perhaps by adding the current date. Here is the filter, and it allows you to filter by things like your labor levels or org units for things like division, branch, or department, or employee group. Here, you could determine whether or not employees will show in ascending or descending order. Here, you could choose your output format. For training purposes, we will choose PDF. Overtime breakout. The default is to show all the types of overtime that an employee has on their time card. But as you can see, there are other options for perhaps segregating it. This is the options section, and it is here that you'll see a series of checkboxes that represent some of the most common options available specifically to the time card report. So depending on the type of report that you are running, the options you will see in this options section will be different. For training purposes, we choose to include signature lines and a page break after each employee. In the date range section, you can determine what period you would like to see in this report. And you have options for the current pay period, previous pay period. You can even choose a user-defined period. Email. If you check off this box, an email attachment will be sent to your email application. From there, you could use the features of your email application to perhaps forward it to others. Or you could use this application to send that email attachment of the report directly to those other recipients. You notice that there's a message here that if you're going to send it directly from this application, that if it's going to be sent to multiple recipients, to separate the email addresses with a comma or a semicolon. In the Generate section, it is here that you can determine when the report itself will be sent or will be generated. I'm sure most of the time you will want your reports to be generated as soon as possible. However, you could say, I'd like this report to be generated at 8 a.m. every week on a Monday, or bi-weekly on a Monday. So you can think of this as the set it and forget it option for reporting. And once you have things set as you would like them, you would click on Run/Schedule. When you do so, it lets you know that the report itself is being generated. When it finishes generating, there will be a link that you can click on. In addition, you can also save a template, a custom template, as a favorite. So once this gets done, I'll show you how that can be done. All right, so the report has finished generating. Now, if I just want to see the output of the report, as was the case under the employee dashboard, I can click on the link, and it will show me output. In this case, we have the other options that we also said we wanted as well, such as signature lines. And because it's in the PDF format, just like any other PDF document, we could print these out, or we could save it as a PDF document. But let's say that next week I'd like to run this report the same way that I ran it this week. Well, I can save a custom template under Favorites. And I do that by clicking on this gray star icon. When I do so, you'll notice that it now shows under Favorites, Time Card. If I click on the link under this for this favorite, you will notice that the previously chosen options have been preserved. So next week, if I want to run it the same way, I just click on Run/Schedule again. Now, if this favorite is one I no longer need, to remove it, I would click on this gold star. And when I do so, I will get a message asking, are you sure you want to remove this as a favorite? When I click on yes, it is removed as a favorite. Now, as far as the output of the reports, in red here, it lets me know that reports older than 90 days will be automatically deleted. So that means if I do nothing and I just wait 90 days after this date, this output of report will be removed or deleted automatically from under generated reports. However, I don't have to wait that 90 days. If I know I'm not going to need this report anymore, I can put a check mark here and then click on Delete Selected Reports. What comes up is confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this report? And when we click on yes, it has been deleted. This will conclude the formal portion of our training. However, before I take your final questions, I'd like to once again acquaint you with a further resource for getting information about Stratus Time. And that resource is the help link. I'm sure you'll agree we've covered a lot of information in today's session. Well, there's documents that cover many of the topics that we've talked about, such as time cards, reports, time off requests, and more. There's also a comprehensive manager user guide. But as was previously mentioned, there are also documents for employee level users having to do with web punching, time off requests, and time card approvals. Well, at this time, if there are final questions, now would be the time for those questions.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Do you have time to show us the scheduler and specifically the visual scheduler?
You know, taking a look at things, it was definitely on my checklist, but right now I'm listed. I'm logged in as a supervisor. It's not visible, but I can show you it. So it looks like your feature access template needs to be updated, and I'll definitely make sure to let the assigned account specialist know that. But I can log back into that other login and show you it there if that's okay.
Yes, please.
All right. Give me a moment.
Thank you.
All right. So here we have the visual scheduler. So what it's going to do is show you the employees that you have access to, and it's going to show you their start time and end time.
Can we go ahead and mute all the participants? It's difficult to hear.
Sure.
Thanks.
So it is here that you would see the employee schedules. In addition to being able to view them, you can also edit them as well. So let's say that for Abby Bell here on Wednesday, we need her to come in at 7 a.m. Well, we can click and drag and make that edit as needed. And I don't know if you'll have a use for creating schedules, but if there's those of your employees that perhaps have schedules that change so much that maybe assigning them to a schedule template might not be practical, this can also be used to click and drag and create schedules on the fly and edit them as needed. Alrighty, at this time, are there questions on any of the topics? And by the way, is that all right to show for the scheduler? Was there other things you wanted to show?
Let's see if there are questions. I think for our organization, we'll typically use the visual scheduler to generate everyone's schedule each pay period. Well, I know that's not typical, but we have a pretty complex scheduling system over several locations. We're covering 24-hour operations, so for us it's pretty critical. So I'd just like to hear from our guys, our home managers, and the other managers on the call, what questions you have.
Now, some of us share different employees. Are we going to be able to access them on ours?
Yes. So once the system is built, you'll have access to your employees as well as employees of the managers in your Go team. Since some teams tend to share employees, you're able to work together to reschedule those and reassign those employees if you need to. But you'll have access to everybody who is a direct report of you.
Does that include J2S?
Yes. All J2S scheduling will also be done in this system.
Okay.
So if I had somebody coming from Stagecoach to my house, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to contact the manager from Stagecoach to have them put on the schedule.
You'd have to, you'll need to work with the schedule with the manager of that other home just so you're not double scheduling somebody. But if the answer is yes and that home is within your Go team, you'll be able to access that employee. If that employee is outside of your Go team, you'll have to manually enter that person. Or that the other manager will have to schedule it.
On a schedule, it showed them moving 8-hour blocks. Is there a way to adjust that to the 12.5?
Say again?
On the schedule, it showed that it was moving in an 8-hour block. Is there a way to change that to the 12.5?
Yeah, you'll be able to click and drag on one end to extend the number of hours for that shift.
Okay.
For the reporting, I seen that there were signatures. How does that work? Like, are we going to have to, sign our name, they sign their name, and we send it to Diane, or is that for us?
That wasn't necessarily...
I don't think...
Yeah, I was just showing that as a feature, using the options, but that's definitely not a requirement. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we don't foresee any need for paper signatures. We're going to be using the system exclusively as far as we can see for now.
So will Diane be able to access these, or do we have to somehow send them to her?
Diane will have access to them.
Okay.
So once you approve them, Diane will receive them.
Happens if the employee does not approve their time card.
We'll get back to you. We're still looking through how that's going to work and what the options are.
So how will the J2S time sheet get to J2S?
J2S will be required to use this system for us. If they need to do something else for J2S, J2S will need to coordinate that with their employees.
Okay.
Now, will they be able to finalize their time cards after they're done for the day?
Who's that, the J2S employees or our own?
No, our own. And anybody who accesses it. Like Jackie said with approving the time card, will they be able to approve it right after their shift is done?
I think that's a technical question for our trainer. Can you jump in?
Absolutely. They will be able to do it because it's, here, I'll show you. Let me get back into the application. So in getting back to the employee dashboard, sorry. You know what? Let me go ahead and punch out. I'll clock out for today. Now, under time card, I have an out punch that is registered, so I can go ahead and save that, and it lets me know that the time card is approved. So, yeah, as soon as they punch out, they can approve it.
Awesome.
To train our own employees on this, correct?
When you say their own employees, are you talking about the J2S employees?
No, is there going to be a webinar for the employees, or will that be our responsibility to train them on this?
That will be your responsibility to train them.
Right. And when will we have access to be able to start using this?
Roman, did you
I can jump in on that. Hi, Jackie. We're still working with Paychex to finish building the system, and we're doing some just checking to make sure that all the employees are assigned correctly before we get usernames. But I expect in the next few weeks we should be set up. And then I was also told that we'll be given material, handouts with instructions and images that we can use to train the employees.
Oh, good.
So they'll have references.
And just to kind of add to that, again, remember that there's the help link here. So for things like web punching, there's already documents in the system. So if they have login, they can walk them through how to web punch.
Have access.
Sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
Have access to the manager board?
They won't, but so if we're taking a look at things from an employee standpoint, you'll still notice that there's a help link here. So this is what the employees are going to see when they log in. And again, they won't have access to the manager documents, but they will have access to the employee documents. Further questions at this time?
I'm good.
Guys, I would say if you think of questions after this training, feel free to email me. This is Roman. I'll follow up with you. And if you want to revisit, again, we have another training on Thursday, or I can always send you this video again.
Alrighty. Well, if there's no further questions, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to Stratus Time. And as always, thank you for choosing Paychex, and you folks have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.